Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This week I'm talking to Luke Richards. We're talking about mental health, and in particular we're talking about seeking help. When you get to the point where life can be a little bit too tough, the process that one takes when they do realize that they are in a bit of a tough spot to actually reaching out and seeking the help that's required. One of the reasons why this is a very important subject for me and my family is that in 2004, my biological father, he took his own life. For him at that point, life was really tough. He was struggling. He didn't want to speak out. He didn't want to ask anybody for help. And because he had all this bottled up emotion, stress, and anxiety, whatever you want to call it, it just got to a point where it was too much. And he thought for himself that it was easier for him just to take his own life. And for him, his problems went away that day, in November 2004. But unfortunately for us, as a family, we still have to live with that pain to this very day. I don't want other families to go through what we've been through. It's very hard to deal with, and you're constantly talking about it, constantly asking yourself, what should I have done? Should I have spoken out? Should I have asked him if he's okay? And it can be very difficult, especially when we live in a world where no one really wants to be honest about how they are feeling inside. And this particular episode is going to be great in terms of hearing somebody who's actually been on that side of not wanting to speak out initially, and how he actually went about starting to seek the help and starting to speak out, and how that's sort of a direction that we need to be heading in this world today. Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. Welcome, Luke. I'll just get Luke to just quickly introduce himself. Let us know who he is.
Yeah, g'day guys and gals. My name's Luke. I'm from Melbourne, Australia. What else can I say? I'm a dad. I've got two beautiful young boys. I'm a husband, and I'm an ultra marathon swimmer.
Nice. So I've got Luke on today. He's going to briefly go over his backstory and I guess share with us the process that he went about when it came to seeking help for dealing with some of the things that he couldn't deal with himself. So Luke, I'll just shoot it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, I think that probably I've travelled a bit of a bumpy road, you could say. I've struggled most of my life with mental illness, depression, anxiety. I've survived a couple of attempts on my own life. I've struggled with addiction for a very long time. And I think, as I look back on that time of my life and all of those times, the one thing that is true about all of them, no matter how different the situations were, was that, I didn't really do the best I could to seek help and get appropriate help. What I know now is that, the way to recovery and to become what I consider to be a recovered person, like I am myself, it's a team effort. It's not an individual sport. It's something that you need help with all the long way. The challenge often really is that you don't know that. It took me a long time to realise that I needed someone else to help me. I didn't want to admit a lot of the issues that I had, and tried to work things out on my own, quite often using the shortcut method, which never really works.
Yeah, so you talk about not sort of admitting it or not seeking it out in the beginning. Was there a reason for you in the early stages why you didn't look to seek out the help? Was it because you were worried about what other people would think, or?
Oh, look, I think in the early days for me, I was 11, I was a kid, there was a lot of things happening. I was quite brutally bullied at school. There was some, issues at my family, just with separation and disconnected relationships with dad and a number of other things. And I don't really know that I understood what was going on with me. We're talking about the 80s. I don't think people really even knew, we knew what depression was, of course, but it's not like it is today. God bless my family's cotton socks, but we were the harden up school of methodology. You just got on, pulled your socks up, and just did whatever. And so I was trained that what I felt didn't necessarily matter. It was just I just had to ignore it and go through it. And I sort of did that. But what happened was that it snowballed. I often describe myself as being one of those powder keg guns, that they stuff the old ones. You stuff, and what I would do is every time I would feel really bad, I'd just keep stuffing things down below, and then eventually I just explode. And at its worst, that explosion ended up in a suicide attempt. At its worst, at its not so worst, it may have just been a standard outburst that any sort of teenage person or young person would just go and have a bender and off you go. I didn't know it was, when was it? It wasn't until my 30s, late 30s, when I was actually starting to deal with my issues with addiction, did I even really get diagnosed for depression and anxiety. I never went to see a doctor. I think historically that's because of the way things were when I was growing up. I don't think people today, I think that they're more likely to go to the doctor about things. They're probably more likely to talk about things. Men, less so, clearly. But, I think there's a sort of a number of different sort of factors, being environmental and even just me. Through the sort of, as I was on my way to the bottom, a lot of it was denial and me not wanting to know, really wanting to face the truth, because to face the truth and to face all the other things that I eventually faced was for me to face my biggest demons and my biggest fears and my biggest, the most painful experiences of my life. And I'd been running for those for such a long time that was just my natural response.
So at what point was it that you realized that you needed to seek help?
I think that really happened. It happened probably about 2 years before I got recovery. I knew that I needed help, but I also wasn't quite ready to receive it. So there's two bits to that bit, and the first bit was I'd gotten to the point where my family was so worried about the way that I was consuming alcohol and the life that I was living that they'd sort of they would regularly talk to me. I was living at home. My life was I'd go to work, come home with a bottle of Cointreau at that time, so a 700ml bottle of Cointreau. I'd go up to my bedroom and I'd drink it all. And I wouldn't talk to my parents. I wouldn't do anything. So clearly they knew that there was a problem. Me, I was in so much pain that I just didn't care. And I had another failed relationship, and I was just not in a good spot. And I just can't do it. I'd run out of energy for trying to keep up the facade and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, this is not good, the way that I'm living my life. And so I went to a doctor to seek help with the drinking and and that was when he sort of alluded that some of my past was probably some of the reasons why I was hiding in the bottle. That did a lot. It's almost like sometimes getting better and working through a lot of these problems is a matter of moving forward in sometimes inches, sometimes feet, and sometimes millimeters. And sometimes you go back a little bit. And each time I sort of had my eyes opened a little while, actually probably more like a turtle. I sort of just stuck my head out of the shell had a bit of a look around, and then went, no, and stuck my head back in the shell and kept on that behaviour. And each time something worse happened, something a little worse happened. So each life, the consequences of the things that I was doing got a little bit worse, or the way that I felt got a little bit worse. And so I sort of had these moments where I had, almost a massive hard stop, and then that sort of, I was open to listen a little bit, and I sought a little bit of help, and then I got too scared and I ran back away again, back into the old things. And it was really about 3 years later, I think, before I sort of had my final moment where I was so broken and shattered that I was ready to actually accept help wholly, solely, and I suppose make the start.
Times where you'd go home and just drink, like would they say, hey, look, I think you need to seek help, or what was their sort of response towards you?
Yeah, it's very hard. Like, it's such a dangerous, not dangerous. It's such a terrible thing for families to go through, living with someone who's so clearly driving towards a brick wall at breakneck speed, and watching them do it and not really being. You have to be. I often say that you have to be like a trapdoor spider when dealing with people like me. You have to wait for your prey, wait, and then at the right moment you got to pounce. Because the reality of it is that the more and more my people spoke to me about it, the more and more I avoided them, and the more and more I took myself away from those situations. I eventually, when my parents got too much for me to deal with, I moved out. I went and lived with someone else, and that gave me another couple of years. And happened to be one of my best mates. Eventually he sort of clued on to what was going on, and things started to turn there as well. There were moments again where we sort of have these conversations, and I'd be, look, I don't know, I can't do this anymore, and I try to get some help, but I wasn't quite ready. The key really is to just. It's probably the most painful thing, and I can't imagine what it would be like for someone else or for a family member to go through this. But just to sit there and listen to what's going on, and I suppose the question that I would ask if I went back in time and said to my parents, "This is the question you like." It's like, are you tired of Are you tired of the way things are going? Have you had enough of the way of the trajectory your life is on? And do you want to change? Do you want things to be? Would you like things to be different? And if you had have asked me that, I'd probably gone, yeah. I don't want to do this. Not to directly confront me. The more you directly confronted me, the more you backed me into a corner, and the more I would just run away.
So you start to seek help in the form of seeing your doctor. What was the early stages of seeking help? What did that sort of look like for you?
Yeah, I think, once, I suppose in the early stages, it was about sort of making sure that I had counselling and a psychologist, and with regards to the alcohol abuse, there was things that they were giving me to help make that easier. And they were sort of all good. And they were all great things. Like, I think the best place for anyone to start, is to go and see your GP if you've got one that you talk to regularly, and just say, look, I'm not good. Get yourself a mental health plan. Get yourself off to a psychologist. If the person that you get to doesn't work, then find another one. Just keep finding one until you find someone that you gel with, because it's very hard sometimes to find the right person to spew out all of these painful moments to. In the end, when I went through the process of recovery, a lot of that I did that with my sponsor, who's not a psychologist, but just someone who'd been through a hell of a lot of crap themselves as well. So in the latter days, what got me through recovery and getting well was effectively finding my community of people who had been through things similar to me. Finding people that who had done some pretty bad things like I had done, who had felt the way that I had felt, who could understand anything that I said and not judge me for it. And that was pivotal, and having my family were like were my goose, you know, on the journey. You know, they were my wingmen. They kept me. They supported me through it. You know, they were always there, and that's really important too. They just weren't the people that were that I confided in. They weren't necessarily the people that I could tell everything to. And that whoever that person is, you know, that's it's really important that you find them. So, and you know, whether that be a psychologist, whether that be a doctor, whether that be a mate, whether that be a group, you know, if there's some particular type of thing that you've experienced, you know, whether go and there's groups out there for that type of thing, for almost anything. You know, get yourself on. If you don't know where to go and you're totally lost, get onto Beyondblue. You know, they've got an amazing reference. You can get on chat, you can get on telephone, and they will help find you the right type of service for whatever's going on for you at that point in time.
And so how long did it take for you until you finally found somebody or that group of people that you could openly talk and actually start to address some of the issues that you were facing?
Yeah, so for me, I suppose it was my final attempt. You know, I suppose you can separate out the issue of substance abuse to depression and anxiety, because they are very much interrelated, but you're solving methodologies is generally separate. So for me, you know, I was recommended into AA. And that's where I found that group of people. You know, finding the right person was about asking for recommendations. You know, I'm sort of lucky that my sister is a psychologist, and she would try and help me find people. And it was through that process that I found someone that worked for me. I think that, you know, if you don't have to navigate this quagmire by yourself. I did a lot of that stuff and I failed miserably. And sometimes that's a part of the process of getting well. You know, you have to try all of these things before you know, I didn't want to go see a psychologist. I didn't want to go and do all of these things. And in fact, I did everything else possible not to do that one thing that worked, because I didn't want to do it so bad, right? And in the end, that had to be like the last possible thing for me to do and then I went, all right, well, I've got to give this a try. I've tried everything else, and then it worked. You know, then I was actually then in the right frame of mind and everything else for it to work. And that's and that can be quite often the trickiest thing. You know, but it always starts with talking. Like what I know today is that the secrets keep you sick, and not communicating what's going on upstairs. You know, in anything that's making you feel really mentally unwell is something that you can't keep to yourself, as it festers and it snowballs. And then one time you can be sitting on a couch and the most horrific thing we can all possibly think of becomes a good idea, and you only need to be successful once.
Today it seems I think maybe people try and go for quick fixes with things like this, and I do think that it's something that may be able to sort of work itself out overnight type thing. For you, how long has the journey been from beginning to, I guess, now, the whole recovery period?
Yeah, I think, you know, the reality of it is that it's an ongoing piece. You know, whilst I consider, you know, on the balance of averages, I'm good every single day, and I don't have depression that plagued me like I used to. And anxiety is something that comes and goes based on, you know, things that probably would cause anyone anxiety, life situations. So on the whole, I'm good. That only happens because I actually do things now to make sure that I maintain what I call good mental fitness. I've worked out that the things that contribute to me being running on all cylinders is that I need to have a constant and stable routine. I go to bed at the same time. I get up at the same time. I go to my training, and I physical exercise is a big part of my process. And when I take those things out of my life, slowly but surely everything gets a little bit wobbly. So I think there's two things. It's like once you sort of hop over the fence and you're really good, you can't just walk away from it. You have to actually continually. It's like a garden. You just have to maintain it, or the weeds grow. And so, I think you were absolutely right that we're almost programmed these days to be a quick fix. If I've got a headache, I take an aspirin, or I have a Panadol.
Yep.
If I want it, we go to the doctor. We go for pain pills. And we think that that's the only way to solve the problem. And whilst I can 100% say that at points in time, antidepressants and other related drugs of that kind, as in prescribed by a doctor, have been critical in me getting through. They don't. It's not a long-term solution. Like, until I actually sat down and looked at the problem, and faced it and worked through it, was I able to really let those things go. And that's what I think is critical to the process. Like, I'll give you a really good example. So my last relatively major depressive episode was about 18 months ago, close to 2 years ago. I just lost my job. I work in a really small, tiny industry. In fact, if I lose my job now, there is nowhere left for me to work in this country. I'd have to try and pack my family up, go overseas to find a job. That's the only way that things would really work for me. And so I lost my job. We just bought a house. We've got 2 young kids. I was the sole, the major breadwinner in the family. I won't say sole. And I thought we were up that creek with a paddle, and I couldn't see any way out. And it was crushing me. The pressure of having my entire family's fate feel it right on my shoulders, and me not being able to live up to theirs and to my own expectations of that just flattened me. Or you can add the additional factor in is that the way that I exited out of the final business that I left was not particularly good. They were trying to get rid of me and make it hard for me to stay. They didn't act in an honourable or a good way in that regard. So I wanted to leave long before, but I couldn't. So I was sort of in this painful position to start off. At any rate, it all snowballed, and left me in an extremely depressed state. I stopped swimming. I stopped doing a whole heap of things, and I just got so stuck in the darkness of the situation that it got to the point where I honestly thought that the best way for me to deal with this was for me to not be here more. And thank God for my wife, who was. I remember I was here, I was doing the dishes, and that's what I thought. I'm like, well, I've got insurance because of the work, and if I'm gone, then all the money problems are gone with it. They'll be right for the rest of their lives, and the only thing is they won't have me. And that was a good idea. And I spoke to her, and after, you could imagine, I laugh now for something that's terrible, not funny at all, but we were able to just sit there and, she's like, what the hell are you talking about? Before, old Luke would never have spoken about that. He would have kept that to himself. And then we worked out, well, all right, well, I've got to get myself off to the doctor. So I took myself off to my GP and I said to him, this is what's happening. And he said, right, well, it's time to get you on XYZ. And obviously he's been treating me for a while, so he knows. And just give you some room to process what's going on without everything happening, at 17 different directions. Then I went back to putting a routine back into my life, getting up and doing things. And then eventually that all came good, and I came good, and I haven't looked back since. And I think, that just shows A, that I'm susceptible, B, that I had to end up dealing with the problem, right? So obviously I went out and got a job, but I also went and started with really small changes, getting back to the basics of things that I knew that I know now that I have to do. And it can be something as simple as just, giving yourself just a little bit of something to work for. If you're feeling hopeless, then you need hope. And hope can mean lots of different things to lots of different people, but maybe it's just I need to feel like I've done something today, and maybe that thing is actually just making your bed, or maybe that thing is just doing one thing different that's going to make you smile today. It sounds incredibly simplistic, but it's like sometimes building your way, like it's like building a wall out of it. You're building your steps. You're at the bottom of a pit, and today you've dug a bit and you put one step down, and you can see the top of the ridge, and you look up and you go, okay, now I'm going to build another step, and slowly but surely you stick it. And as you can see, as you're getting closer and closer to the top of the ridge, you can crawl your way out. And as you get closer, you get a little bit lighter every single step of the way, and then you're out and you're free. But if you just sit at the bottom and you just look up, you're never going to do anything, right? Action is incredibly important. No one ever thought their way out of depression.
Yeah,
you have to do stuff.
Yeah. One thing I'll ask you too. You talk about going through the process of finding groups and whatnot that sort of have been through the same thing, and that's something that we've done with our son. Our son has autism, and in the beginning it felt like we were the only ones until we found groups and families that were in a similar situation. Then all of a sudden our stress and anxiety got alleviated a bit, because to know that there are other people going through the same things that we're going through, so it was a lot easier for us to deal with what we're going through. Was that the same with you as soon as you found these groups?
Absolutely. You're absolutely spot on. I mean, the thing is that there's it's a shared experience, right? Like when I felt like as an alcoholic, I was terminally unique. You would drink if you had my problems in my life, and you would be, and I thought that no one could ever be as bad as me, worse a human being than me, done, everything. I was the king of that landscape. And then I got into AA and I heard incredible stories of people, and I realized that not only was I not unique, the things, whilst the circumstances of our lives were different, what we felt and how we experienced things in many ways were the same at an emotional level. And that made me, when I didn't feel alone in that, it was an incredibly relieving experience. Incredible. And you could turn around to one of those parents and just say, look, today I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't do it. I've never been so angry in my life. And I felt like doing X. And they could sit there and just go, yeah, man, I know what that feels like. And when they say that to you, that they do. It's not like you could say that to me and I would say, yeah, I know, but that I don't really know, right? But when someone's walked that road, they know. And there's something incredibly powerful and comforting. It's like someone giving you a hug,
Yep.
and
100%.
Because my first day of recovery, I I went to this AA meeting, and I'd been there before, and I was so ashamed because I failed. I'd failed all the other times to give up. And I walked in, and there's probably 150 plus people in this meeting. And I sat down, and someone said to me, "Look, no matter what you do, you got to stand up and tell and admit that you're an alcoholic." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so I'm in this room, and what they do is they get right at the start. They go, "Is there anyone new? Less than X days of recovery?" And you stand up, and you go. Everyone stands up, and finally it gets to me, and I'm like, "My name's Luke. I'm an alcoholic, and today is the day. It's my first day." And this woman got up. Never seen her before in my life. She got up out of her chair. She came up to me. We're in this church right away. Right? So it's like this. It was really a surreal thing. And she gets up to me, and she just comes up to me, and she just grabs me. She hugs me so fiercely, I nearly exploded. And she just said to me, I was bawling my eyes out. And she just said, "You're okay. You're going to be okay. You're in the right place." And I knew. And from that moment, I was at peace with what was going on, just because that woman just knew, and the way that she was taught everything. And for me, that experience is key, and that you can have that with wherever it is, and there's lots of things, around, lots of places where you can get that, and it doesn't always have to be that exactly the same thing. Like, I could probably go and talk to someone who's got a problem with gambling, and we could have the same connection, because addiction's addiction, right? And it's the same thing around depression. It's the same thing around anxiety. I've got friends who have anxiety, and we talk about it, and it's like, yeah, I know what that's like.
Obviously, it's the I guess the more we speak, the more we're open, the easier it becomes. Obviously, you mentioned earlier on, growing up in the 80s, 90s and whatnot, was very, very rare, and I guess not manly enough to speak up.
Yeah.
And obviously we're sort of feeling a little bit of the effects of that mentality as we progress more. We're now starting to have a lot more people, all these things like Movember, Are You OK Day, those kind of things. How do you see it as someone who's been through it? Do you feel as though we're heading in the right direction?
Well, we're definitely heading in the right direction. Like, it's a generational problem that will, hopefully my kids will be aware enough because of our experiences to take action early and to get help. I think that for me, why I speak publicly about my experiences, and share quite at times some incredibly painful things, is because I realise there's two parts to this piece. There's the I want to reach someone who's hurting, and I want them to hear what I'm saying, and see a light at the end of the tunnel, and go and get some help and do something about it. And then there's because I think, as I mentioned before, hope is the fuel that gets you out of these things. Then it's for the families that again, on the other side of the fence, watching their family, their loved one go through this, and again showing them there is a way out and it can be done. And then the last part is that so that we normalize this thing. We normalize the plague of mental illness, because you see it all too often in the news and everywhere else, that in certain ways, yes, we're accepting of things, but we very quickly revert back to it's just an excuse for their behavior. it's never an excuse for someone's, like, it's a really hard thing to put into the right context. Like, I did some pretty disgraceful things under the influence of substances, right? I drove my car when I shouldn't have. Now, I would never have done that. But my brain, I wasn't thinking right. Am I responsible if I had done something? 100%. I have to pay the piper at every single turn. The issue is that there is a time when I'm not thinking correctly. My brain just is not working and not living and conforming to the standards that we as a society set. Is that my fault? Some people say yes. I can guarantee you that I didn't wake up one morning and go, I want to be an addict. I want to push myself to the edge of the abyss and back. I want to hurt every single person that I've ever loved. I didn't want to do that. And if you had have known that that in theory could happen to anyone who has a drink of alcohol, they could end up like me. Highly unlikely, but it could. And that's really the point of it all, is that we never know, where we're going to end up. No matter what decision we make today, it could impact us 10, 20 years later. And we need to understand that at times, whilst people are responsible for their actions, there is a pretty good reason, and then they're not always acting in the right manner.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about social media. Social media, it's got its positives and negatives. Positive is that you do see a lot more people coming out, speaking up, and we got more access to a lot of these different groups that are out there trying to help the situation. But then also the negative is that a lot of people are subject to people sort of demonizing mental illness. As you said before, like people saying that you're just using it as an excuse. Where do you think, in your opinion, social media help? What sort of impact that's having on the topic?
I think, I suppose there's two facets. There's a couple of facets to that. The first one is that there are so many people trying to get the message out there now. You can, if you hashtag recovery or whatever it may be, depression, you will see so many brave people who are out there talking about their problems. And that is incredible. I think, the social media is, it's a massive challenge, right? Like, you look at I open my Instagram feed, and I'm only on Instagram for one particular reason, to get my message out there. And yet I am inundated with stuff. Like, if I try to hit the search button, I also see is just these incredibly fit-looking women, and it's like, what is that? Like, why do I have to see that all the time? What standard is that setting for girls and boys? Like, where? And then you've got all these Insta-rich people who people think that's the way that you need to live, and if you don't live like that, then you're a crap human being. Those pressures just add to this social anxiety. We start to have relationships with our devices that are more important than humans. I think I'm probably a little bit of a hypocrite because I'm an incredibly introverted human being. I'm quite insular, I think, is probably the best word. I struggle with I've got a very small group of mates, and I keep the best contact I possibly can with them. But I see a lot of people who all they do is interact with this, and less with actual people. And that's what I think is the damage. It's like, what happens if I haven't got a message? What happens if I've sent someone a text message and they don't like it? There's lots of things where it's anxiety provoking. It's I think time will tell with what it is. You know, you see people it's an incredibly abused Twitter. Like I'm not on Twitter, but you know, I've seen enough of that platform to know that I don't want to stick my head into a position where it's going to get bitten off. You know, I don't. You know, personally, I don't consume any news at all.
Yeah,
At all.
I'm exactly the same.
Sorry, I'll dial that back. I could I don't have. It's not in any of my. So I don't get it from Facebook. I look. If I hear something's happening, then I'll go and look for the news. But I don't actively have it coming into my life because, again, that's just it just stresses me out. It gives me too much. You know, I get upset about things. I read comments from people and I get upset about the way people are talking to each other, and it's like I can't interact in that way. Like I don't want to interact.
Yeah, that's exactly why I don't. Exactly as you said, you know, it's just one of those things to be upset or have this negative emotion. Like that's why I don't do exactly what you said, because it creates an emotion for me that I just don't see, that I don't want, you know.
Well, I also found that, you know, it was making me not a very nice person. So as soon as I started to engage, then I would to get into arguments with people, and then I would, you know, I would just I'd probably become a bit of a troll, you know. And then it's like, and then I was always angry because I was just waiting, and I needed somewhere to go. So I just find someone who said something I didn't like and just let rip. And then it was then that I realised that can't be contained. Like that would spill out into my family. And that wasn't good. And it's like, well, who wants to live like that? Like, who wants to live to just sit down and say crappy, shitty things to people all the time? No, I don't. You can't have a positive relationship with another human being by putting negativity into the world. Like, it just can't happen.
No, it's as you said, social media is just one of those things that, unfortunately, it's not going anywhere anytime too soon. It's just a matter of us trying to find ways of, and I mean, you talk about interacting with humans. I mean, we sort of still can use social media if you are sort of like, and what I've done recently is, you know, during all the lockdown, like a lot of our friends and family who have had businesses who have been affected, you know, I've like been able to sort of reach out to them through Messenger and have sort of like deeper conversation with them, saying, look, how are you going? Is everything okay? That kind of conversation I'm having, and utilizing social media in that way. So
yeah, I know that's sort of what it was used, you know, in like the whole reason, you know, I got on Facebook was to, you know, I've got family around the world and whatever else, is just to keep in touch with what's going on and connect with people. And I'm exactly the same. You know, I've reached out to people that just to check in. So, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Or so there are those things. Like it can actually make the process of reaching out to someone not very intrusive and very easy, you know, because it doesn't take 3 seconds to send a messenger to someone. And in fact, you know, the positive of my interactions on social media, I've made a number of friends across that platform, across Instagram, who are just incredible human beings, and I love to death, and I've never met them. And I may not, you know. I've got this one guy in the US, and he is just an incredible guy. You know, right from the word go, we just connected, and it was really weird. And I've had other people who have walked a similar path to me reach out to me and say hello. Some people who are out into the sphere like I am, and some people who aren't. And, you know, I've had people reach out for help as well. And so for me, you know, those little moments of good outweigh the other stuff. I don't think about the other stuff. It's got nothing to do with me. I just try and focus on creating that little drop that may be a tsunami somewhere else, you know, because focusing on the other stuff, I mean, I can't control what happens there anyway. I can't change society. I can't change all of those things. I can change me and how I interact with the world, and that's where I focus.
Oh, that's awesome. Just as we're getting towards the end, can you just talk about your experience with Beyondblue? You mentioned them earlier, one of the great services that are available for people. So if you can just maybe talk about them.
Yeah, so I'm a speaker for Beyondblue, and what that means is that they get me to go and talk at functions and businesses and wherever I'll go wherever they ask. To just share my story in a lot more detail than I have today, and that is all about bringing the awareness out there at a grassroots level. As far as how they are as an organisation, I think I've consumed their services, so I've gone on their chat, I've gone on their 1300 number, I've used their website. They've actually got an online forum where you can go and sort of interact with people who have the same sort of problems and ask questions. And I think that's an incredibly powerful tool, because you can ask a question and still be somewhat anonymous. Like, one of the most powerful things about AA is that no one knows who I am, so I can say a lot of stuff about me, and it's highly unlikely that anyone's ever going to know who I actually am. And so that gives me freedom. And I think those platforms, especially when you're trying to do explorations, are incredibly powerful. If there's any, they fund many groundbreaking projects. There's one called the Wayback Service, which is run all over Australia in certain municipalities, and it's basically a service to help people who have just tried to take their own life. And what it does is help them create better connections back into the community. Because I personally feel that my problem was a problem of being disconnected from life and from people and from everything, and working out how to rewire yourself and reconnect yourself is really good. And the way that service is incredible for that. They've got I can't remember the name of it right now, but they actually have like it's almost like a mentoring service, and it's for someone who's sort of is at a particular stage with their mental health. They're not quite progressed that they need to see a mental health practitioner, but they still need some help. Maybe it's someone who's I've just gone through a breakup, or I've just had I've lost my job, or whatever, some sort of stressful life event, and what I need is just someone to give me a bit of coaching to get out of it. It's like a coach, and that's an incredibly great funded. So none of those things would be happening anywhere if it wasn't for the likes of Beyondblue.
Mm-hmm.
And Movember's the same. They fund a number of projects, globally. There's one there's a surfing one in Sydney, which is just incredible. About getting guys out onto the surfboards and having a chat, and I think that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
We have these things today.
Yeah. Oh geez, sorry, I just lost my sorry. Yes, that's what I was going to ask. So, as someone who's been through the process, if there's anybody who may be listening or watching who may want to sort of try and reach out to a friend or family member and just sort of ask them, how they're going, what would you say would be the best way to sort of approach them? Because as you said yourself, like you sort of didn't really appreciate sort of people saying, hey, are you okay? And, so what would you say would be the best way for someone to approach someone?
Yeah, I think avoid questions that you yourself just answer generically, no matter what's going on in your life. How you going? I'm okay, mate. Those sort of questions. Personally, my favorite question to ask is, how's your day going? Out of a score of 1 to 10. And depending on what they give you, you can start to drill in. Oh, it's only a 3. Well, why is it? What's happening that's making it a 3? Whatever. I've lost this sales deal, or the dog died, whatever it may be. from the responses you can generally gather, well, how often are you at a 3? Like, are you a 3 most of the time or an 8 most of the time? I'm actually I can't remember the last time I was an 8. And the reason why that's such a powerful method of talking to someone about it is you're not actually talking about a problem. You're talking about numbers. And I'm not going to tell you most of the time exactly, because I'm afraid, right? I'm afraid of everything, and I'm afraid to tell you anything, mainly because I'm ashamed of it, and because I should be able to fix this myself. Saying those things in that way, I'm not telling you anything, and from there, okay, well, do you want the next question is, well, okay, how would you like it to be a 9 most of the time? Yes. Well, what do you think you need to do for that? Do you know? No, I don't know. Would you like some help? I can find you some help. If I can't help you, we'll find you some help. And so it's sort of leading them to the position of saying that helps what they need. If you don't want to ask that, then it's like, well, what's happening? No matter what they tell you, it's like, oh, that must be tough. It's horrible. You have to empathize with someone. I can't imagine what that feels like, man. How long has this been going on for? How long can it continue? Like, where are you? Are you done? Are you? And would you like things to be better? No one's going to say no to, actually, I don't want things to be better. I want things to be worse. What would you be willing to do to get this? Do you want me to be there? The main thing is as well, like, if you go on this journey with someone, like, you're on it with them. You have to be reliable. You need to check in with them. You need to basically, get on board for everything. Because otherwise, the reality of it is that they think that you've abandoned them, but you don't have to solve any. I think a lot of people are afraid to ask those questions because they don't know how to help the person, and that's okay. You don't actually need to know how to help. I don't know how to help a lot of people. I know how to connect them to help and to suggest places for help, and that's the important thing. Is it's not about you becoming the guy that lifts the load for that person. It's about you being their wingman on that journey as best you can.
And I guess just want to touch briefly. You said did you find the swimming, the marathon stuff as part of your getting better?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I did. So it was sort of when I decided on my journey to wellness, I decided that I wanted to live the best possible life that I could because I'd spent so much time not living it. I tried lots of different things. I met my wife in recovery. She hasn't known me any other way than being happy, or she's known me being unhappy, but being a relatively good, well-functioning human being. And it was through actually her that I sort of got introduced to swimming. She was a recreational swimmer, and we lived literally opposite to the pool. She said, "Let's go for a swim." I'm like, I actually loved swimming as a kid. I grew up on a lake. I got in the water and I absolutely loved it. And then she had this dream that she wanted to do this open water race in Melbourne called the Lawn Peter Pub. It's like one of the biggest ones, but it's a beast of a race. It's 1,200 meters in pure ocean, and it's hectic. And I went, all right, well, I'll do that with you. And so in helping her do that, I discovered swimming in the open water was amazing for me. I realized it was the place where I'm just there. I found a community of people that I just love. And there's an experience of being out on the water and knowing that the guy that you're swimming with or girl that you're swimming with, we're all looking out for each other the whole time, and that their lives depend on me and I depend on them. And it's something that's incredible that comes out of that. The ultra marathon stuff was about bringing awareness to mental health and showing people that, you can come back from the gates of hell and do some, what I think is amazing things. Some people think I'm pretty stupid, but I enjoy it.
So finishing up, you've mentioned, you do talks and that for Beyondblue. What sort of message do you always like to leave for people out there who may be listening, who may be sort of struggling with life a little bit?
Yeah. The first thing is that, recovery or change is possible for everyone, no matter what. That no matter how dark it is, there will always be a dawn, and it all passes. That the only way out that I have found is by asking for help, and there are so many people out there who will help you. You just got to stick your hand up. And call. That's probably it.
No.
Yeah.
Look, that's thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being as open as you are. I can definitely get that this is something that you're very passionate about, raising the awareness of mental health and getting people out there to seek the help if you are sort of, finding things a little bit tough. So I guess I'll finish off once again by saying, Luke, thank you so much for coming on. And is there any way that people may be able to follow your journey as you continue to go?
Yeah, you could just Instagram or Facebook, Swim for Recovery. That's swim and the number 4 and recovery. You'll find me everywhere if you Google that. But otherwise, I'm on Instagram. And if you're listening and for whatever reason you feel like you need to reach out to me, just hit me up there, and I'll do what I can to point you in the right direction.
No worries. And I'll just quickly ask you, down in Melbourne, you a footy fan or?
No, I'm actually a baseball fan. Would you believe? Yeah, it's another story. But I'm not particularly handy with a footy. I used to barrack for Carlton, but it was too distressing. So, mind you, with 2 boys, I better learn how to kick a footy at some stage.
Yeah, maybe get them to support a team other than Carlton, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, it looks like my son's going to barrack for Richmond because that's where my wife's family's aligned. So I think I'll be going to a lot of Richmond games.
Oh, that's that hurts me to hear because I'm a big Giants fan. So, yeah. Anyway, once again, Luke, thank you so much. No worries.
You're welcome, Elliot. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please share, leave a comment, hit the subscribe button. I've got a whole heap of videos on the channel where I've chatted to a lot of great people. So yeah, if you could, that'll be great. And so I hope to catch you on the next episode.